after the cartoon series of Tintin at the beginning of the 1990s, what was there to come? Oh yes, there is one thing missing. Tintin the musical. But do not fear, this came out in 2001. Goifje de Sonnetempel. Translated into English, Tintin and the Temple of the Sun. Musicals often have the doubtful reputation of being so-called cash cows. What does that mean? Well, you have an intellectual property, you've earned a lot of money with said intellectual property, and then you think, hey, how can I earn even more money? And therefore, musical. And then very strange things starting to happen. I mean, come on, who was waiting for Rocky the Musical? And on the other hand, there are productions where you think, hey, I know this character, I know this story, but this musical, hey, this is really good. So for today, let's shake things up a bit, bring my opinion first on Goifje de Sonnetempel, the musical. Because I like this musical production a lot, well, as far as I can judge it. Unfortunately, the musical only exists in the original Dutch version and in French. But from what I've seen and from what I understand, it's really, really good. I've seen a TV production of the Dutch version and I found the songs subtitled, so I was able to understand most of it. And also the story adapts the two books, The 7 Crystal Balls and Prisoners of the Sun, and of course I know this story. And for today, let's take a closer look at the musical and all the ideas that have been woven into this well-known story. Because the creators of this have been, well, creative, really creative. The musical begins with the expedition Xander's Hardyman. They are in South America, in Peru, looking for the lost tomb of the famous Inca Raska Capac. And they find the tomb, but their native guide warns them about the curse of Raska Capac. And as you can see here, the tomb is secured with an ingenious mechanism, and when it opens we see a fantastic special effect on stage. The opening of the tomb turns into a goosebump song about the curse of Raska Capac. For copyright reasons, the songs can only be played short here, but I hope you get to know what it's about and how well the pieces of music are composed. The songs are very well orchestrated and sung, and the actors' equipment is modeled on the comics down to the smallest details. But after this somewhat creepy introduction, it's time that we meet our hero. Or rather, there are two heroes, Tintin and Snowy, in Dutch, Goifje and Bobby. Just like in the book The 7 Crystal Balls, both arrive at Marlinspike by train. Bobby, Snowy the dog, is actually played on stage by two real dogs and now and then by a hand puppet. We'll see why the hand puppet has to be. On arrival at Marlinspike, Tintin hears the latest newspaper headline: the Sondas Hardiman expedition has found the mummy of the Inca Raska Capac in Peru. He buys a copy of the newspaper and then sings a song about how much he loves adventure. This is a very dynamic, beautiful song, and it fits the spirit of the Tintin adventures. When you hear the song, you want to go on an adventure with Tintin.
Daar in de verte lokt avontuur. Niet langer wachten, geen dag, geen uur. Kuitje en Bobby, kom vol die twee. Kuitje en Bobby, ga met ons mee.
The song carries you away. Come with us on an adventure. There's an adventure every day. Face the challenges. And in the song and in the scenery, there are a lot of allusions to Tintin's adventures, which puts you in the right mood. And if someone hears this who can ensure that the musical is also translated into other languages, please do so. It will be worth it. My word on that as a Tintin fan. I promise I'll buy a ticket, I buy the CD, whatever. I buy a season ticket if I have to. Okay, let's just move on. After Tintin has a brief chat with a man who thinks the Raska Capac story will not end well, like with Tutankhamun, he finally arrives at Marlinspike Hall. There he first meets Nestor the butler, then he meets Captain Haddock, who is delighted to see their old friend because he has a surprise. What a surprise that is! That has to wait for a moment, because Professor Calculus also has his appearance. Oh, by the way, Nestor and Haddock have the same names in the Dutch version, but Professor Calculus is called Zonnebloem, sunflower. After Calculus disappears into his laboratory, Haddock has the opportunity to make his grand entrance. He wants to show Tintin a magic trick.
Let goed op! Ik begin. Doe je ogen heel wijd open, ik doe water in de glas. Let wel op, het is zuiver water, niets in mouw en niets in jas. Hier is 1 kartonnen koker, koker kan niet leker zijn. Koker gaat nu over een glaasje en de water wordt nu... Water natuurlijk. Water. En de water wordt nu... Water! Tuurlijk, wat zou het dan moeten zijn?
Yes, Haddock wanted to turn the water into wine, just like the magician at the music hall show did. Haddock convinces Tintin to go to the music hall with him to watch the magician closely. So the two of them go to the vaudeville show this evening. Now you just can't go to a theater show and watch only one number. You have to see the whole program. And there are a lot of special guests in the show. For the first skit of the evening, the announcer proudly presents the Milanese nightingale, Bianca Castafiore herself. And this is the point where Haddock wants to flee for the first time. But Tintin is holding him back, and so both of them are watching the extraordinary singing talent of Bianca Castafiore. And by the way, on the CD, this piece of music is called Music for a Diva and a Dog.
Ik lag bij de spiegel in mijn hand. Ik lag bij de spiegel in mijn hand. Wie ben jij, mademoiselle? Wie ben jij? Antwoord mij, zeg het, ze nee. Stop! Haatje.
Pardon.
Maestro. Caro maestro, prego da capo.
And yes, the song Ha ik lach is really the original jewel song from the opera Faust. And here you've seen why the part of Snowy has to be played by a hand puppet from time to time. Well, let's use this opera scene to talk about costumes and about masks. Especially when we see Bianca Castafiore here, she looks great. She just looks like the counterpart in the comics. And that's true for all the other characters we've seen so far: Tintin, the Captain, Nestor, and Professor Calculus. And we'll see more of the typical outfits later. But on with the show. Haddock has fled the scene, leaving Tintin and Snowy alone. So they watch the next number, the Fakir and Madame Jamila. Or Jamila, as he says.
Mag ik absolute stilte de zaal alstublieft? Eerst zal ik mevrouw Jamila onder hypnose brengen. Mevrouw Jamila, bent u bereid om op mijn vragen te antwoorden?
Ja, Saib.
Mevrouw Jamila, wat u mij zeggen? De persoon die zit op stoel 10 van de 9e rij.
The Fakir and Madame Jamila do some funny bits with the audience, and then the Fakir points at a lady and asks Madame Jamila whether this lady is married.
Ja? Zij is getrouwd. Haar man is filmregisseur. En zijn naam is Heining.
Excuseer, is dat juist?
Ja, dat is helemaal juist, ja.
Ik zie hem. Samen met 6 andere mannen. Ze komen terug van een lange reis door een ver land. Ze hebben een mummie bij zich.
De mummie van Raskar Kapak. Bobby, wat een toeval.
Ik voel even pijn. Veel pijn. Een geheimzinnige ziekte zonder genade.
Maar dat kan niet. Mijn man is zo gezond als een vis. Dat kan niet.
En ik zie een kristallen bol. Scherven. Groene rook. Uw man is ten prooi aan de vloek van Raskar Kapak.
The announcer tries to play over the incident by simply continuing with the program. Next comes the magician that Haddock was dying to see. Instead, Haddock interrupts the magician because he's gone lost behind the stage. After this new incident, the announcer comes on the stage and calls out the lady who received the warning about the curse from Madame Jamila. The lady needs to come home urgently because her husband, the photographer of the Saunders Hardiman expedition, is seriously ill. In a cutscene, we see the Inca chief who sings about how he enforced the curse of Raskar Kapak on the expedition Saunders Hardiman with the help of 7 crystal balls. And as you see, it's a great stage effect with those floating crystal balls and the persons inside. This is what I want to see live on stage. And at the end of this piece, we once more hear the theme of Raskar Kapak. The one left of the expedition is Professor Tarragon, and Tintin and friends go to visit him. As it turns out, Calculus and Tarragon are old acquaintances. Calculus helps Tintin to meet Tarragon so he can ask a few questions. 6 members of the expedition Saunders Hardiman have fallen under a mysterious sleep illness. The only one left is Tarragon. Shards of crystal balls have been found with each victim, and Tintin asks Tarragon whether he isn't afraid to be the next. And Tarragon tells Tintin no, he isn't afraid, because he is very well protected. He has 2 bodyguards, 2 absolute specialists in their field, so he doesn't have to worry at all. And while Haddock starts drinking whiskey, we meet those 2 absolute specialists.
En heren, is nog nieuws?
And I must say this, alone for Thompson and Thompson singing a song called We Have Everything Under Control, it's worth watching this musical.
Wij hebben echt alles onder controle.
Mooi zo.
Dit beroemde duo in zijn balhoed en tenue. We hebben echt alles onder controle. Ga rustig slapen, de Janssens waken over u.
After Thompson and Thompson showed off their special talent, Professor Tarragon presents the mummy of Ras-Karkapak. Tintin and his friends are of course impressed. But Tarragon has even more. He has a book with the translations of the inscriptions from the tomb of Ras-Karkapak. In these inscriptions it is said that after many thousand moons there will be 7 palefaces who will take the mummy of Ras-Karkapak to a distant land. But the curse of Ras-Karkapak will follow them. While Tintin is reading, a thunderstorm is coming. Lightning strikes the chimney, creating a ball lightning in the room that ultimately completely destroys the mummy. The utterly shocked Tarragon asks Tintin to read the last inscription. This one says that the curse will be completed on the day when the lightning thrower, Ras-Karkapak is of course meant, destroys himself by lightning. Tarragon is now convinced that the curse has come upon him. Tintin therefore offers that he, Haddock and Calculus stay overnight at Tarragon's place for safety. Despite the Thompsons' excellent protection, of course. Tarragon accepts gratefully, but a melody strangely familiar to the audience soon heralds a new calamity. In the comic book, Tintin, Haddock and Calculus have the same dream that Ras-Karkapak gets through their window and hurls a crystal ball. This nightmare sequence is represented in the musical by this dance number, and it is great and looks just as creepy. The last of the 7 crystal balls is Tarragon's undoing. The curse is fulfilled. In a transition where an entire room floats from the ceiling on the stage, we are now in a hospital. This is where the 7 sick researchers were brought. So far it has been the case that they have slept and could not be woken up. But now something new has come to this. And the nurses sing about how they disinfect everything because the patients are infected. Or in Dutch, besmet.
Beset, 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 beset.
But what are the patients infected with? It's a strange thing. Every day, at the exact same time, all patients have the same seizure. They scream and squirm in their beds, seeming to be in pain and agony. The doctors are puzzled. They have no explanation for the matter. And I think mummy curses aren't something you find in Grey's Anatomy. And as suddenly as the seizures start, they are over. In a heartbreaking song, the daughter of the expedition photographer asks Tintin to help them get her father well again. From the point of view of the story, This is of course ingenious to give Tintin another motivation here to get to the bottom of this story. The other motivation is about to happen soon. And there's an important line in the duet between Tintin and the girl. The girl says she wants her father to see the sun again. And Tintin promises her that he will see the sun again. That leads to Tintin's song about the sun, the main theme of the musical. Tintin sings about the fact that everyone longs for the sun, for the light and the warmth. He sings that the darkness is scary, but that the light comes and drives the fears away. This song in turn leads directly to Professor Calculus, who is walking around the garden following his pendulum. The transition is deliberately chosen because, as already mentioned, Calculus' name in Dutch is Zonnebloem, which means sunflower, and a nice play on words is made with sun and sunflower in the original version of this song. While wandering through the gardens of Tarragon's villa, Calculus discovers the bracelet of the mummy of Raskar Kapak. He gets the strange idea to put it on. I didn't understand that in the comic book. Why did Calculus come up with the idea of putting on a bracelet that was on a mummy, on a dead body for 1,000 years? That's a little disgusting. Okay, Calculus is a little weird. But with that, Calculus seals his fate, and Tintin has to state,
En weg was Zonnebloem.
and as if the disappearance of Calculus wasn't catastrophe enough, Bianca Castafiore, the Milanese nightingale, comes to visit Marlinspike Hall. But of course, she doesn't come along. She has her maid Irma with her and her pianist Igor Wagner. And it's incredibly funny, this conversation. Nestor, who said that Haddock is so depressed because Calculus has disappeared, and the Castafiore, who says she would stay in Marlinspike and see that the captain is cheered up again, and that's a good idea. To which Nestor simply replies, "I don't think so, madam." Then the Castafiore sings a song about how the Milanese nightingale brings joy to every home. It's actually nice how they play with the Castafiore stage name in this song, and the song develops into a real crowd. Because, of course, the arrival of the Castafiore did not go undetected. The hustle and bustle is finally noticed by Haddock, who is almost desperate because of the chaos. But here comes Tintin with news. Professor Calculus's head was found at the harbor, and Haddock, who was just depressed a minute ago, finds new life energy. And, as is the case in the musical, Haddock expresses his feelings with a song. The song has the wonderful title, "1,000 Thundering Typhoons, Life is a Wild Ride."
Het leven is een wilde vaart. Wil terug naar het mirakel waar de zee zich openbaart. 1000 bommen en granaten, eindelijk weer dat groot gevoel. Op het kolkend schuimend water, met de horizon als doel. Op het kolkend schuimend water, met de horizon als doel.
Tintin and Haddock run to the port, where they learn from dock workers that Calculus has been brought aboard the ship Pachacamac, which has set sail for Peru. Tintin buys tickets for a seaplane so they can get to South America faster than the Pachacamac. And the first act of the musical ends with a great song that repeats the theme from 1,000 Thundering Typhoons. And here we see two great effects. On the one hand, the sun, which rises here and symbolically refers to the Sun Temple, the central theme of the musical, and the effect with a plane that flies away. They really came up with something for this show. And we see the Castafiore, for once in her life, silenced. The second act begins with a wonderful variation of the theme from the first act, played with flutes and panpipes, which really gives us the feeling of having arrived in South America. And that's exactly what the scenery looks like. Haddock enters the scene and shows a picture of Calculus to the people he meets. But the only answer he gets is "no sé," I don't know. He sings his frustration in a song and is amazed that the people seem downright frightened when they see the picture. Then he meets the Thompsons, disguised as Indians. They both think they have a great disguise and that Haddock doesn't recognize them either, but as you can see here, of course they stand out and Haddock is not fooled for a second. He asks them if they have any news and their reply is:
Wij hebben echt alles onder controle. No sé.
Haddock is delighted when he meets Tintin in disguise shortly afterwards. Tintin disguised himself because he hoped to get some information that way. But the two of them have no chance to go on talking because they witness a mean attack on a boy who sells oranges. Now Tintin wouldn't be Tintin if he let this injustice pass, and of course he interferes. Now the two guys aren't particularly intelligent, so Tintin can outsmart them with a few tricks and punches before Snowy gets in and finally does the rest. And the dog actor really shines in this one. The boy is of course happy that Tintin helped him. He introduces himself as Zorino and tells about his life as a street kid.
Voor een kind van de straat, maar één ding waarom het gaat overleven.
Tintin wants to cheer the boy up. He takes a newspaper out of his pocket and uses it to fold a paper boat. He sings a song that is a variation on the song about the sun from earlier, which is about how this boat in the imagination sails to the horizon and to adventure. Then Tintin shows the picture of Calculus and asks if Zorino saw him. Zorino answers, "Quietly, senor, you shouldn't talk about it so loud. Calculus has committed an iniquity and is a prisoner of the sun." That's why no one of the others wants to talk about it. But because Tintin helps Zorino, he's ready to take him and Haddock to the Temple of the Sun. To do this, however, they need a couple of llamas. Haddock is not enthusiastic and immediately has an argument with these, as he calls them, converted camels. But finally, the three of them leave. Then the stage is rebuilt and we make a detour to Europe, to the Castafiore. She is rehearsing in her dressing room when a telegram arrives from Tintin telling her about his experience in South America and wishing her good luck for the big premiere. Then she steps forward to the front of the stage and begins to sing an aria. Life is nothing but an opera. The Castafiore sings about how you can actually find all the shades of life in opera. And as she sings, the back of the stage opens and the aria becomes a narrative of the adventures of Tintin, Haddock and Zorino in South America. Some scenes from the story, which could not be easily transferred to the stage, are shown and made tangible for the audience, and together with this song, the whole thing is very funny. For example, we see Haddock sneezing on a snow surface and then being buried in an avalanche. We see Tintin have to climb after Snowy, who has fled onto a rock. Then Tintin is attacked by a condor, and the Tintin actor hangs on the condor's legs and flies across the stage. And with this dramatic scene, we dive back into the action in South America. But Snowy, who was kidnapped by the condor, is nowhere to be seen. Haddock and Zorino allow Tintin a moment alone, and Tintin sings the song Friendship Until the End of Time, in which he tells how Snowy has never left him before. The song is very sad, but the sadness turns into joy when Snowy suddenly reappears. Meanwhile, Thompson and Thompson contact their boss to inform him that they haven't found the slightest trace of calculus. That's why they want to try a completely new method. What kind of method it is? Well, they found the pendulum of calculus, and they want to use it to find calculus.
De slinger, de slinger, de slinger, de slinger, de slinger van zonnebloem brengt ons op het spoor. We zullen hem vinden, we zullen hem vinden, al moeten we de hele wereld door.
The pendulum of calculus brings us on the trail. The Thompsons probably thought that too optimistically, because the pendulum leads them in all directions through the whole world. Eventually they realize that only one direction is right: south. And in the south there is, yes exactly, Peru. So they return to the point where their search started. Meanwhile, Tintin, Snowy, Haddock and Zorino take a break in the jungle. And in the cartoon movie The Temple of the Sun, it's Zorino who sings a song here, but in the musical it's Haddock. The song is titled When the Campfire is Burning. It's about the mood at the campfire. When you come to rest, you think about many things that you have experienced and how feelings come up. The song is melancholy, and it becomes even more melancholy as the stage divides again and we see the Castafiore after her premiere. She joins the song with the text When the Candle Burns, and this creates a very nice duet. The next morning our friends are on the road again and encounter the last major obstacle on their journey, the gap at the waterfall. I had to do some research because it looks so incredible, but yes, it is like it is. This is a real waterfall on the middle of the stage. And while Tintin climbs across the gap, the rope he's hanging on breaks and he falls. Fortunately, there's a cave behind the waterfall, and so Tintin is saved. The adventurers follow the cave that leads them into the mountain and come across a statue like the one we saw at the beginning of the musical. Haddock even finds out how the statue's mechanism works. With this, he opens the passage to the Temple of the Sun. And we, the audience, also see the temple for the first time, in which a ceremony is currently taking place. And as you can imagine, such a ceremony is a very sacred moment for the Inca, and that they would not like to see someone disturb this sacred moment. Above all, the great Inca is just about to carry out the curse of Ras Cacapac by torturing a few voodoo dolls. And that's exactly where it happens. Tintin, Haddock, Snowy and Zorino break through the wall of the Temple of the Sun. They are captured and asked why they committed the iniquity of breaking into the temple. When Tintin replies that they were only looking for Professor Calculus, the great Inca decides that they will share his fate. They are sentenced to death at the stake, with the exception of Zorino, who will never leave the Temple of the Sun again. But the great Inca wants to be gracious. The delinquents are allowed to choose the day and hour of their execution by themselves. For this purpose, the condemned are given time to think, which they spend in a cell. And now it's Haddock's turn to sing a sad song. It's a minor variation of Thousand Thundering Typhoons. Haddock looks back on his life, on his friends, and all the wonderful moments that were there. The song also has a special twist, as Haddock sings how he now leaves it all behind and says goodbye. He leaves everything behind, well, almost everything, because...
Maar 1000 bommen van de whisky afscheid nemen kan ik niet. 1000 bommen van de whisky afscheid nemen kan ik niet.
Yeah, he can't say goodbye to the whiskey. Well. Then Sereno comes into the cell. He says he found Snowy, who ran away earlier, and that he will take good care of him. Then he gives the paper boat back to Tintin and sings the same song Tintin sang to him when he folded that paper boat. He wants to cheer up the friends. They are still alive and all hope is not lost. Tintin takes the paper boat and, while Sereno says goodbye to Captain Haddock, he unfolds it. And then things start to happen that Haddock doesn't understand. For one thing, there's Tintin's sudden ecstasy. And when the guard comes to pick Sereno up, Tintin explains that they have agreed on a date for the execution. It should be exactly 18 days from now, at exactly 11 a.m., because that is the captain's birthday. But the captain doesn't even know that it's his birthday. Yes, the 18 days go by faster than Haddock would like, and the two of them are at the stake. Here they also meet Calculus again. The professor has no idea what's going on. The play on words that arises from Calculus' hearing loss works better in Dutch than in any other language. Let's see if you get the joke.
Dat zijn Inca-dames.
Filmopnames. Maar nu begreep ik het.
Calculus thinks all this is a movie. Then the ceremony slowly climaxes, and then the Thompsons come along. The great Inca wants to finish quickly, so they also come to the stake. Then the ceremony continues. The great Inca lifts the magnifying glass, and there finally seems to be no rescue for our friends. Tintin interrupts the ceremony and yells at the great Inca that the mighty Pachacamac, the sun, will not accept the sacrifice, and he calls for the sun. It should hide its face to show that it does not want the sacrifice. At first, Haddock thinks that Tintin has gone mad, but while Tintin continues, the unbelievable happens. The sun is darkening. Panic breaks out among the Incas, and Tintin can finally explain to Haddock why he was so pleased when he read the newspaper 18 days ago, because there was an article in this newspaper that on this very day, at this hour, a total solar eclipse would take place right here. The great Inca kneels before Tintin and vows to do anything for him if he would only let the sun shine again. When the great Inca gives his word of honor on the great Pachacamac, Tintin is ready to believe him, and he calls for the sun to shine again. And the miracle happens. The sun is shining again. The great Inca orders the prisoners to be released immediately, and Tintin's Song of the Sun sounds as a triumphant march. great Inca is still on his knees. He wants to know what Tintin wishes. Tintin takes the Inca's hand and says he wants the curse of Ras Cacapac to be lifted from the explorers who discovered his tomb. The great Inca keeps his word. He will comply with the wish. He has a fire bowl brought and the voodoo dolls that represent the researchers. Then he burns the dolls in the fire. The ceremony is accompanied by a variation of the song Tintin Help Us, the song that Fleur, the photographer's daughter, sang in the hospital. We also see a very nice stage effect. The hospital room floats down from above, and while the dolls are destroyed, we see how the researchers are freed from the curse and wake up. This is how split screen works on a theater stage. Fleur shouts out her thank you to Tintin, and the hospital room floats away again. And at the end, Tintin starts his song about the sun again. But here it is something special. The song is the grand finale, and all the characters in the musical come on stage, sing along, and bow to the audience. And that's where this insanely spectacular show ends. Do I still have to give a final judgment? I think it became clear how much I like this production. It has a lot of feelings, a lot of heart, great actors, great ideas, great costumes. It's all great. The music is just as great, and some of the songs are catchy. My favorite songs from the musical are We Have Everything Under Control and 1,000 Thundering Typhoons, Life is a Wild Ride. It is also interesting how this musical works with motifs, even with leitmotifs. Take Captain Haddock for example, because one of his songs is a favorite of mine. He has a leitmotif, a melody that runs through the entire musical. It starts right at the beginning when Haddock does his magic number, and we already hear Haddock's motif.
Doe je ogen heel wijd open, ik doe water in de glas. Let wel op, het is zuiver water, niets in mouw en niets in jas.
We hear the same melody in 1,000 Thundering Typhoons, Life is a Wild Ride.
Granaat, het leven is een wilde vaart. Wil terug naar het mirakel waar de zee zich openbaart.
And we hear the motif played in a minor key on Thundering Typhoons, I Can't Say Goodbye to the Whiskey.
Maar 1000 pommen van de whisky afscheid nemen kan ik niet. 1000 pommen van de whisky afscheid nemen kan ik niet.
Well, I can't praise this musical enough. After the Dutch original, there was a French version, and CDs were produced from both. There were also pop versions of the songs Koifje and Bobby, Tintin and Snowy, and The Zon, The Sun, as singles. Unfortunately, the musical has not yet been translated into any other language. There was a television recording that I used in this video. However, this recording was never released on DVD or Blu-ray, hence the poor quality of the video. It comes from a VHS cassette. But the producers kept saying in interviews that they would like to bring the musical to other countries as well. This production is from 2001, some time ago, but maybe something is gonna happen, somewhen. And finally, a fun fact. The great Inca was portrayed in this recording by an actor named Chris de Moor. He is the son of Bob de Moor, and this Bob de Moor was the personal assistant to Hergé himself. Now this musical wasn't the last thing we'd see from Tintin.